is one of the most famous battles in the history of the world, pitting one of the greatest military minds the world has ever seen against an allied Europe. On one side, Napoleon Bonaparte, Emperor of France. Opposing Napoleon, an army of British and Dutch allies, led by the Duke of Wellington. 250,000 foot soldiers, 100,000 cavalrymen, 900 cannons. On June 18, 1815, these men and their weapons would meet to determine the fate of the world. On a small field in Europe, at a place called Waterloo. June 18th, 1815. 4 hours into the Battle of Waterloo, two vast armies are locked in mortal combat. On one side, Napoleon Bonaparte, Emperor of France.
Napoleon, as a commander and a strategist, was one of the greatest commanders in history.
On the other side, an allied army under the future Duke of Wellington.
Wellington was the natural man to lead the united forces of the Allies against Napoleon.
At stake, all of Europe. At 4 p.m., 12,000 French horsemen thunder toward the British line in one of the greatest cavalry charges in history.
Form squares! Form squares!
The Allies quickly form British infantry squares.
The squares were lines and lines of bayonets.
But are they enough to survive this massive charge?
Wellington was looking for the back door. He knew his army had just about had it.
The result of this clash will determine the course of the battle and the future of Europe. Can the Allies save themselves and the continent from Napoleon Bonaparte? Ten years earlier, in 1805, Napoleon had begun expanding the French Empire, winning battle after battle, marching undefeated until he controlled nearly all of Western Europe. But his attempt to conquer Russia failed. While he defeated the Russian army, he couldn't defeat the Russian winter. By 1814, the Allied forces captured Napoleon, restored the French monarchy, and exiled the fallen emperor to Elba, a tiny Mediterranean island. The Allied nations of Europe believed that Napoleon Bonaparte was no longer a threat. They were mistaken. April 1815, a message reaches Paris. Napoleon has escaped. Marshal Michel Ney, Napoleon's former general, is sent with a brigade of French soldiers to arrest the escaped convict or kill him. After landing on the French coast, Napoleon marches toward Paris, intending to reconquer all that he has lost.
Soldats! Visez!
Napoleon travels with a small group of loyal officers who had volunteered to go into exile with him.
Ney, mon ami, est-ce que tu tirerais sur moi?
Napoléon Bonaparte! Par ordre du roi Louis XVIII, je demande...
Soldats de l'Empire, vous voulez tirer sur votre empereur? Faites-le maintenant.
Soldats! Visez!
Car je ne m'arrêterai qu'après avoir reconquis le continent qui est légitimement le nôtre. avant!
Within 3 weeks, Napoleon has returned to Paris and has the allegiance of the entire French army. Europe almost immediately reunites in opposing the recrowned emperor of the French.
Britain, Austria, Prussia, Russia declared war, but not on a state, not on France. They declared war on an individual, Napoleon.
In Brussels, an Englishman by the name of Arthur Wellesley, the future Duke of Wellington, arrives to command an Allied army that was quickly convened to drive Napoleon from power. Allied with the British is Prussia, the leading kingdom of the German Empire. The Prussian army is under the command of the elderly Field Marshal Count Gebhard von Blücher.
The last thing in the world Napoleon wants to do in 1815 is go to war. He's not ready.
The Allies declared war on him, so he did not create the war came to him.
In June 1815, Wellington and Blücher assemble their troops for battle. Blücher, with over 125,000 Prussian troops, is just to the east of Brussels. Wellington, near the Belgian coast, has a force of British and Dutch troops that number a little over 100,000. The two armies prepare to link up and march on to Paris in an overwhelming show of force.
Napoleon chose to go on the offensive, to cross the border from France into Belgium and attack.
Napoleon moves quickly to ensure that Wellington and Blücher have no time to join forces. He leads his army of 130,000 north to take on each Allied army one at a time.
Napoleon would concentrate all or most of his combat power against an element of the enemy force, destroy it, and then reconcentrate that combat power against another element of the enemy force and destroy that until he had actually broken the enemy's will to continue to fight.
In his first military action since exile, Napoleon's strategy to divide and conquer works like magic. On June 16, 1815, his advanced troops isolate and attack a much smaller Prussian force. The Prussians quickly fall before the larger French force.
Mon général, nous avons vaincu les Prussiens. Ils battent en retraite.
Bien, parfait. Maintenant, allons nous occuper des Anglais.
The Prussians are seen in full retreat, and Napoleon believes he's already won half the battle. He orders 1/3 of his army to continue following the fleeing Prussian troops. It is the morning of June 18, 1815. Napoleon has brought his newly rebuilt army to the fields of Belgium. To face the outnumbered English and Dutch army of the Duke of Wellington. And when the day is over, the future of Europe will be changed forever.